Is that in?
I think Colorado.
Well, I guess.
Maryland's not a state.
And like Colorado.
Wait, Maryland is. I live in DC.
Yeah, we visited that over winter break, and I was like, I like the campus, but no one was there. Because like I don't think we're good.
So my kids have, I've been with my kids a couple times. My brother graduated from Harvard, so I visited in Boston a couple times.
Yeah.
And I like Boston's probably.
Really? I lived
So-
this summer in New York City, so I
Oh,
visited
really?
Boston. I
Oh,
was
sweet.
smells good. This is weird. It felt like a small town after being in New York.
Yeah, you turn the so weird.
What class is this?
This is realty macro economics.
Macro. Okay. Okay. Never taken that.
Given that this is going to be posted to YouTube, I suppose I also claim that I do not own the rights. My helper today. I've never stopped anyone else before. Okay, are there any logistical questions about course stuff going on at this point? Yes.
Just an upcoming assignment. So the GDP, is that any different from the intro class, or is it just?
No, no different from the intro class. Yeah. You might have a different state this time.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Were you all able to access, or have you seen that this assignment has been posted? Give you plenty of time to do it. It should be a relatively simple assignment for you. Most common errors, students think don't get started on it soon enough. Students do not include their name and course information on the document. Students do not save the document according to the file name protocol. Students do a sloppy job on it. Those are the most common errors, right? Now, there's going to be some challenges for some of you. Good luck. You can get in touch with a student who maybe had me for intro to get some clues about that, or you can maybe get in touch with me. With questions, do not get in touch with me the day that it is due. I will tell you that I am not available at that point. Other than that, does somebody have my news for today? News for the day. Anybody? My news for the day? No? Somebody should have the news for the day. Somebody's responsibility. Intermediate macroeconomics. Head watching assignments. Okay, so I think Ji Kai posted an article here. Did they post an abstract of it? Nope, they just posted the article.
Always attached to that.
Is Ji Kai here? Yes. Oh, do you want to give me a short version of what this is?
Yes.
So let me pull up. Let me share this on my screen. Do. Very good. All right. So this is the assignment. This is the article, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the U.S. economy grew by 1.7% in the fourth quarter, capping a strong year. What can you tell me about this?
This article discusses the change of GDP in 2021, and in the first part of this article, it points out that in 2021, there's an overall increase in GDP through though challenges continue. And in 2021, the economic expansion turned out to be the biggest since 1984. And even though the Omicron has an impact on the GDP in the fourth quarter, economists still believe that activity will normalize in spring. And the second part of this article discusses the status of U.S. jobs. And as a result of vaccination efforts, chief credit conditions, and additional rounds of federal aid to households and business, consumer spending and private investment were revived.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So here we have a graph showing gross domestic product, right? And let's see, it goes back from 2015. And here we see this dip related to the COVID virus. And it looks like not only has the economy caught up with GDP from before the virus, but that it's actually starting to get close to the long run trend that was being observed. All right. So that could be good news. It's interesting. It does not appear that this is being shown in a log format, but rather a linear format. Why might that be important? That when an economy grows, does it tend to grow in a linear fashion or in a logarithmic kind of fashion? Okay. It tends to grow in a logarithmic fashion. So let me come back to that in a minute. And that's relevant for your project. So here's showing the percentage change in GDP product. You know, as you would expect during the pandemic, services took the major hit. Right? Consumption of goods decreased for a little while there, but since people were not spending money on services, right, then they could spend that money on goods instead. So consumer demand for products increased because they were spending less money eating out, etc. Spending less money on vacations and stuff like that. And that may be part of what explains a lot of the shortages that we observed during the pandemic, is that instead of spending money on services, people were spending money on goods. Good, thank you for bringing that. Did anyone else have one prepared? And that's all you have to do, y'all. There's 10 points for sharing some news with the rest of the class. I think there's another one prepared here. Should have been maybe one more. No, okay. Student has not gotten back to me yet. While I'm here, might as well open this up. All right, this is where that assignment is, where it lives. And so today is the 31st. Looking at the 31st, it should be Eric Miller who is sharing some information today. Is Eric Miller here? Would they confess to being here if they were? I don't know. Okay. So maybe that's an online student. They should have posted something by now. If they have not, they need to get on it. Let's see what else is going on. I have not graded your problem set 1 yet. Nag me about that. I need to get on that as soon as possible. If you have not turned it in and you're late, go ahead and turn it in anyway. I want to make sure I understand where you're at. Are you guys doing okay with all these online assignments? Is it overwhelming?
If you try to do it all at once. Yeah.
If you try to do it all at once, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's not do that. Also, there was an issue, right, this week where the due date said that it was due at like 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, and that confused some people. These assignments have been reopened until February the 1st, if you missed it, because of that confusion. Typically, I will have the assignments due. I think I've corrected the dates for all of them, such that they're all due at 11:59 on Saturday nights. Okay. Which means that you have your Sundays free. What if I don't want my Sundays free? Do that. The 2 watch videos I have been recording. I'll come back to you. Thank you. I've been recording and posting links to Zoom for all of the lectures I did in class. Zoom started doing something weird where they made it harder to watch the videos. So now I'm downloading the videos and I am posting them to YouTube. So they're all there on YouTube. Now, if you go to that, you could maybe go to my YouTube page. Beware, all who enter there. Okay. So for week 4, there's the project, there's about week 4, and then there are the assignments for week 4. Which are numerous. The about section here has you reading 3 assignments. One is by Radford, the Economic Organization of the POW Camp. Please do read that. It's a great story. It's a great story. There's a short article by Larry White about inflation. And then these 2 chapters from Hazlitt's book, Economics in One Lesson, are also about inflation. Larry White's going to be in the house sometime this semester. And I am anticipating that he will take over lecture one day while he's in town. So I very much look forward to that. Some of you went to Will Luther's talk last semester. Larry White was Will Luther's dissertation advisor. I think Larry White also advised Professor Karat's dissertation. This guy knows more about macro and banking than I could ever possibly. He's forgotten more than I'll ever know. That's how you're supposed to say that, I think. Okay, so that's the guy. And I will post video lectures once they're done. And I'm starting to build the rest of the semester out, so I'll be able to post stuff sooner than I have in the past. Is Fed watching on here twice? That says May 3rd. Yeah, that's right. What about this one down here? May 3rd. Ruh-roh.
I think it did that as like the last person to go.
Okay. Yeah, May 3rd is because it's the last person to go, but I don't know why I have the module on there twice. I shouldn't. I'll have to fix that. Last time, I was dragging you through the algebra to solve one of these end of chapter questions from chapter 3. And I started by telling you that we're working with the Cobb-Douglas production function, and given an alpha of 3, and you had a question I forgot.
I was gonna say, did you extend the due date for like the first week one too? Because like the first week there was an assignment due at 3 a.m. and like I missed that one.
Send me an email.
Okay.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, yes, but also I wanted to ask about the GDP state and country comparison project. Are we just choosing a state or are we assigned state?
When you open the Excel document,
Okay,
there should be an assigned state for you.
okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then you find the country that pairs with that state in a different tab on the Excel document. Is that clear to everybody now? Okay. Good. Now, I really don't like reopening Achieve assignments, but if there was an honest error, let me know. Okay, so I started out this problem, and the question was kind of asking, it said, suppose that an economy's production function is Cobb-Douglas, with the parameter for alpha being 3/10. What fraction of income do labor and capital receive? And we use our basic marginal productivity of labor formulas to discover that the share to labor is 70% and the share to capital is 30%. And we can, from here on forward, just recognize that these coefficients, right, these values in the exponential here indicate the share that is going to be paid to each of those factors of production. Then we can move forward from there. And I said, well, what happens if the quantity of labor increases by 10%? Quantity of labor increases by 10%. And if the quantity of labor increases by 10%, we want to compare the new output with the old output, okay, using the larger amount of labor, 1.1 quantity of labor relative to before. So before there was however much labor there was, now there's 10% more, so we can just put 1.1 there. And then in calculating the ratio, in so doing, we find that we get 1.069, which indicates that the share to labor has increased by 6.9%. Or that the payment to labor has increased by 6.9%. Is that what I'm finding? No. What I'm finding here is that output has increased by 6.9%. Thank you. All right, output has increased by 6.9%. Given that output has increased by 6.9%, we would want to find payment to labor, and we find that the average worker gets paid 97.2% of what they had been paid before. So wages go down, which should make sense, where laborers compete against one another, pushing wages down. In the meantime, there is no more capital than there was before. So given that output has increased, we should expect that the payment to capital will have gone up. We find that the payment to capital has gone up by 6.9%. Is that right? Now, one of the conclusions from this model then is that, well, new workers are competing against existing workers and therefore pushing existing workers' wages down. Immigration is bad for local workers and good for local owners of capital. It's helpful to remember at this point that we are dealing with a highly aggregated economy, right? Very, very aggregated, and that these models have limitations. Hopefully your homework assignment demonstrated to you how limited our models actually are. The truth that we know so far, a hypothesis that has yet to be rejected, is that an increase in migration will tend to harm the incomes of low-skilled Americans by about 5%. The low-skilled workers will see a small decrease in wages. However, almost everyone else will see an increase in wages. And such an increase in wages that they could easily be taxed, and those taxes could go to compensate those whose wages have been harmed. The most prevalent study on this has been done by Lant Pritchett and Michael Clemens, who have a paper called $1 Trillion Bills on the Sidewalk. And that derives from an economics joke. Right? Two economists are at a conference together walking around the street, along the street, and one of them sees $1 on the floor, on the ground. And he bends over to pick it up, and the other economist says, "What are you doing?" So I'm bending up to pick $1. The first economist says, "That can't possibly be true. If there were $1 laying on the sidewalk, somebody would have already picked it up." And the joke is that economists believe that perfect efficiency obtains immediately. So there should not be any dollars laying on the sidewalk. If you happen to see one laying on the sidewalk, it must be a trap. It's a trap or a joke. Right? What Clemens and Pritchett have found is that there are $1 trillion bills laying on the sidewalk in the form of relaxed migration policies. If more migration were made possible, they claim that if all borders were made completely open for migration, global GDP would triple. Global GDP would triple. Now, America probably would not experience a tripling of its GDP. However, if global GDP tripled, that would mean that a lot of underdeveloped countries become very developed very quickly. And it turns out that highly developed countries typically don't go to war with each other. It could mean a new regime of peace and flourishing. Okay. So having made a claim about migration, I have to correct that claim. Moving forward into the material from chapter 4, we're going to start talking about money, which is awesome. Who doesn't like money, right? I like money. And that's why I assigned this article, the POW camp article. Make sure you read that carefully. What is money good for? Why do we have money? Money is useful as a store of value, as a unit of account, and as a medium of exchange. Where did money come from? It turns out that every society where there is extensive trade finds some sort of commodity to use as money. This is universal to humanity. cultures that were far separated from one another, independent of one another, have found commodities to use as money. So it must be something about humanity that recognizes the value of money. Now, a dollar doesn't have any value in and of itself. In the same way, an ounce of Troy silver does not have any value in and of itself. As economists who come from the subjectivist tradition, we recognize that nothing has value in and of itself. There are no objectively valuable things. You might say, well, people are objectively valuable. Yes, okay, you can believe that. That's true. However, you demonstrate your conviction and your belief of that by how much you're willing to sacrifice to save the life of another person. To the extent that you are not willing to incur the costs of saving another person, you demonstrate that that person is not objectively valuable to you. Right? So then nothing has an objective value. All value is derived subjectively from our imaginations, from what it is that we want. Money is, in many cases, the least valuable thing. After all, we're using as money today either ones and zeros on a computer or green pieces of paper. What can you do with a green piece of paper? You cannot eat it. You might be able to write on it the same as you could on a regular piece of paper, but this piece of paper is much less expensive than this piece of paper. The opportunity cost of writing on this is very high. Okay. What else can we say? Why is it that we accept money in exchanges with one another? Because we expect that somebody else will also find that money valuable in exchange. It is merely because we all subjectively find money valuable that we agree to use money in exchange. You'll see in the POW story that they come to use cigarettes as money. People find a commodity to use as money. Why? Well, when you're in isolation, all by yourself, you have no recourse to trade, no reason to trade with anyone else. You just have to produce whatever you can. So then any good that you do produce for your consumption is, in a way, the opportunity cost of producing some other commodity. So you have coconuts and fishes on your island by yourself. Getting another coconut means that you have to give up some fishes. In that sense, coconuts and fishes are a price unto one another in your consumption of them, but that's really just a price in terms of your opportunity costs. You don't need money to do that. Time is sufficient to demonstrate that. If you're in a small tribal community where there are exchanges, but they're not extensive, then barter will be sufficient for trade. Barter will be sufficient for trade. The fewer the commodities that exist, the fewer produced goods that exist, the more likely it is that barter will be sufficient for exchange. However, as we move towards a fully developed economy, you cannot have a fully developed economy without money to use for exchange. We need a money because the money is used as a unit of account in weighing opportunity costs of doing different things. Should I make my plow out of iron or out of steel? Well, it depends. What is the opportunity cost of using iron relative to steel? How can I know what the opportunity cost is? I have to have some unit for accounting those opportunity costs in. Money is that tool. Similarly, when we are engaged in barter, finding somebody who wants what it is that you're selling can be difficult and costly. It takes time to find somebody who's willing to exchange with you. One nice thing about money is that everybody wants it. Why? Because everybody is willing to take it. So then money facilitates exchanges. You don't have to find an immediate mutual coincidence of wants in order for an exchange to obtain. Instead, you just got to find somebody who wants money, and almost everybody does. Therefore, we reduce the transactions costs involved in finding somebody who does want to enter into that exchange with us when we have money. Money is amazing in that sense. Where does money come from? Well, today, we do not any longer have a money system based upon commodities. Instead, we have what we call a fiat money. Money is supplied by the Federal Reserve. Is that completely true? No. Banks also create money. Financing also creates money. However, for the purposes of trying to explore these ideas, we're going to start with the basic idea that money comes from the Federal Reserve, our central bank in the United States. The Fed engages, and we're going to call this the Fed from here on in the semester. Sometimes people will say, oh, the Feds are here. When they say that, they don't mean that economists from the Federal Reserve have arrived, right? They mean that Agent Johnson and Agent Johnson have arrived, tried to rescue Takagami Tower. But I went full dad on that one, didn't I? Okay. Right. They mean the FBI. When we as economists talk about the Fed, we mean the Federal Reserve, not the Feds. These guys typically don't carry guns. They often carry calculators. Used to be they carried slide rules. You don't want to get slapped with one of those either, though. Okay, so the Federal Reserve is the agency responsible for controlling the supply of money as it's observed in our economy today. How much money is there and where does it come from and where is it? We might try to understand the emergence of money and of banking, and eventually of what we call a fractional reserve form of banking. Okay. So to start from first principles, so to speak, suppose you're a miner and you go dig up some gold, and you use your gold to go and buy some tools so that you can go dig up some more gold, or maybe you stop by the saloon on the way through town. Whatever you do with your money is up to you. I don't care. I'm an economist. I don't care. Talk to me outside of class. I might provide you some wisdom. But in class, I don't care. The Gustavus non est disputandum. You want what you want, and I don't care why. You take some of your money and you put it in the bank. Wait, a bank? What's this bank that you speak of? Back in the day, a bank would be a big old safe. Well, why don't you just put it in your own safe? Well, because if you put your money in your own safe, you might have to hire some guys to guard your safe in order to keep your safe safe. Right? But if you don't have some guys to guard your safe and you put your money in your safe, it might not be safe because somebody could steal your safe. So you might want to hire some guys to guard your safe, or you might want to find somebody else who already has a safe that is safe because it's guarded by some guys. You find a safe that is safe, then you might put your money in that safe with the other guy's money. You might pay that guy to keep your money safe. After all, he's got to pay the guys who are keeping the safe safe. Okay? So we have a bank where everybody is putting their money into the same safe. Now, the guy who owns the safe might have little piles of money. This is your money, this is my money, this is Bob's money, all right? And all of the different piles of money are being kept safe. Or the guy who owns the safe might just write down how much money you put into the safe and keep it in a ledger and then just toss all the money in there in one big pile so that, like Scrooge McDuck, you can go swimming in it. It's a really safe pool. Resident rule. Anyway, the safe is safe, okay? Now, the guy who owns the safe is going to have to charge you some money to keep your money safe. And so when you go to take your money out, you get less money than you put in. That's sad. However, you would be willing to do this if, instead of keeping your money in the safe, you kept your money in an unsafe place and it got robbed. So the opportunity cost to you is the safetiness of it. Am I losing you all? Are you bored with me already? Snow, we were bored when we walked in. Okay. Well, one day, the guy who's keeping the money in the safe realizes, man, I got a lot of money in the safe. An awful lot of money. I'm making money by keeping other people's money safe. That's fine. However, I've got a lot of money of my own. A lot of the money in my safe is actually mine. And so what I might do with some of my money is I might loan it out to somebody else who wants to borrow some money. That other person might borrow that money and be willing to pay me a rate of interest on that money. I can make money off of my money. That would be lovely. Why might I be able to make money off of my money? Well, because different people have different subjective time horizons. Somebody might want the money now. They might want the money to go to college so that later on they can get a good job and pay back their student loans. Okay? So I start loaning out money of my own because I have more money than I know what to do with, or I am willing to postpone some of my consumption until later. I am a saver and you are a borrower. So I loan you some money and you go do something with it and you pay me back more money than what I loaned you. How are you able to do that? Somebody else, somewhere else, must have less money than they had before. If we have a fixed amount of money in the world, if you have more money than you used to have, and there's a fixed amount of money in the world, unless there are fewer people, it must be the case that somebody else has less money than they had before. Are you still with me? Okay, does that mean that they are worse off? That's a hard question. That's a hard question. Just because you have less money doesn't mean you're necessarily worse off. Why not? If the thing, go ahead.
If I have more capital items, or use that money to buy capital items and make you money.
If the person who borrows the money uses the money to buy capital equipment, that in turn makes you more productive. Then there's more stuff in the world later on. Having more stuff is what we're really after. Remember, we can't eat the money. What we want is the stuff. So it could be that everyone's quality of life has improved, even though everybody except for the person who came up with a new idea and borrowed the money has less money than they had before. Well, the person who came up with the idea and their banker. Right? Now, the person who borrowed the money and the banker both are able to consume in proportion more than what everybody else in society is able to consume relative to the previous period, but everybody else could also be better off as well in terms of quality of life. This is why we make the important distinction between nominal and real value. Real value is the stuff, nominal is the money. Are you still with me? Okay, so the banker loans out money in order to earn money using the money. The banker is going to be careful to loan out money to people who can pay him back. The banker is only keeping a fraction of the banker's own money in the bank. And as a result of loaning some of their money out, they earn profits on the other money. Well, somebody notices what the banker is doing. Somebody who keeps their money in the banker's safe notices what the banker is doing. They say to the banker, "You're earning profits on your money that you're keeping in the safe?" "Why, yes, I am." "Well, you can use my money to loan money too." "Really?" "Yeah, you can loan my money too." Now, when I tell the banker that they can loan my money too, and the banker loans my money, have they defrauded me? No, they have not defrauded me. We have a contract, an agreement that says you can loan my money. There are those who believe that fractional reserve banking is per se fraudulent. That's utter nonsense. Fractional reserve banking is not fraudulent if you agree to it. And of course you agree to it. Why do you agree to it? Because when you give your money to the banker as a saver, and the banker takes that money and gives it to somebody who wants to borrow it, then in the market for loanable funds, The banker is able to help pair together borrowers and lenders who otherwise might not be able to find one another. In the market for loanable funds, we have the same problem as in any other market, that it's hard for buyers and sellers to find each other. So oftentimes a middleman will arrive or emerge that helps borrowers and lenders to find each other. Without the help of the banker, it is possible that this borrower finds this lender and they're able to borrow money from the lender. What interest rate will be charged in that transaction? Something in here, we don't know. We can't know. Whatever interest rate does emerge in that transaction might be in part evidence of the relative bargaining power of each entity. Or how good of a bargainer are you? Are you a good negotiator? All right. That will help to determine what interest rate actually obtains in that transaction. However, if this is the best transaction that can obtain, there are all these other potential transactions that could obtain between borrowers and lenders that do not obtain because they can't find each other. So from the economist's point of view, those are deadweight losses. It's a world that could be improved upon. Well, that's what the banker does. The banker creates a market between borrowers and lenders and helps to pair together borrowers and lenders who otherwise might not be able to find each other. The interest rate that borrowers will have to pay on average goes down. The interest rate that lenders can get will on average go up, although any given transaction that might not be the case. We get closer to identifying a market interest rate that prevails throughout the entire market. But what's most important is that deadweight losses decrease. The banker captures the difference as a profit. But the banker has made everyone's lives better off because net surpluses have increased. Net surpluses have increased. These deadweight losses and these deadweight losses are no longer deadweight losses. They are now surpluses that are experienced throughout the economy. If you and I engage in an exchange and we're both made better off as a result of that exchange, then you and I both have more money to spend somewhere else. Maybe with you, maybe with your friend. Every surplus captured is as if it were a positive externality to the rest of the world. Surpluses are like a positive externality. At least part of them are positive externality to the rest of the world. So the banker functions as a middleman. The first banks were benches in Italy. That's where we get the word bank from. It's the Italian word for bench. Really, really rich men would sit on their benches and loan some of their money out. And they kept on getting richer because they would loan their money out at interest and be made better off over and over and over again. Banking, in a way, democratizes the opportunity to gain from borrowing and lending exchanges. All of us can be a part of it now. All of us have the opportunity. So fractional reserve banking is made possible when banks loan out more than, or not more than, but banks loan out some of the money that they have on reserve. Can a bank loan out all of the money that it has on reserve? Sure, it could. Would it be wise? If a bank loans out all of the money that it has on reserve, and then one of its depositors come by and say, hey, I'd like to withdraw some of the money that I have on reserve here, the bank would have to say, I'm sorry, we don't have your money. In which case, nobody else will trust that bank. Nobody else will make any deposits at that bank. The long version of this story winds up at the fact that competition amongst banks helps for banks to decide how much money to keep on reserve. A bank will want to loan out as much as it can because by loaning out more, it captures greater profits. But it is disciplined by the fact that its depositors might want to come and make withdrawals. And if it loans out too much money and there's not enough money available for depositors when they want to make that withdrawal, then the bank becomes untrustworthy and people will bank at a different bank instead. So a reserve ratio. And I see your hand will come to you in just a minute. That's what percentage of deposits are held on reserve. And the reserve ratio emerges through the competitive process. Well, in the 1930s, a bunch of banks failed. A bunch of banks had not kept enough money on reserve. Why? Because in a short amount of time, depositors wanted all their money right away. As a result, the federal government got involved, creating the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which insures deposits held in banks. I think currently the value is close to $300,000. Right? So the government is going to insure you as a depositor for money that you have supposedly got on reserve at a bank, even if the bank chooses to loan out some of your money. What would a bank have an incentive to do in that case? Well, if the government is going to bail it out, then the bank is going to loan more out and behave in an even more risky manner. We call that moral hazard in economics. If a bank has an incentive to engage in more risky behavior, then how do we keep the bank from doing that, from engaging in that risky behavior? We impose a regulation, a rule, where the Federal Reserve tells banks that they have to keep a particular percentage of deposits on reserve. That's why there is a rule about the amount of money that banks have to keep on reserve. They would do it on their own if the government were not insuring depositors, if the government were not bailing the banks out. However, because the government does bail banks out, we have a reserve ratio that is a regulation or a rule that is enforced by the government. Questions?
You got to it.
Imagine that. Yes.
So what is the deadweight loss that's created by the FDIC involvement then? If it's essentially, if it's doing the same exact thing?
Well, I don't have it ready to model for you right now,
Well,
shocker,
you know,
but we can think about it, right? So the Fed creates the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation on the one hand, and then the Federal Reserve on the other hand, right? Both create incentives for moral hazard, for risky behavior. Okay, well then those banks will loan out more than they should. Should? Right? Are we trying to be normative here? No, but they're loaning out more than they would in a purely competitive environment where market forces were disciplining their behavior. If they're loaning out more, then chances are those loans are being spent on things that in the long run, on net, would prove to be malinvestments. Not the best kind of thing to invest in. Now, if you take your money and you invest in something that is a big, heavy piece of capital equipment with really high fixed costs, right? And that's where you take your money and invest it. And it turns out that it was a bad investment, right? Then that machine might not have any good use at all. In which case, the deadweight loss to society are all of the resources that went into producing that hunk of trash. Right? We could do the same thing by digging holes and then filling them back in again. It's a total waste of energy and a waste of resources. The deadweight loss wouldn't be observable. It would be an unseen cost. Bastiat has a whole paper called The Seen and the Unseen. Okay? Those unseen costs are what could have existed that would be productive for all of society if the resources had not been dedicated to the production of this hunk of trash instead. So bad price signals, including the price value of money, the time value of money, namely the interest rate, bad price signals frustrate the planning that is done by entrepreneurs and business people, resulting in less than the best and most efficient outcomes that could obtain. Now, those are all sort of fictions as well. Right? We don't know what the perfect world would be. We also don't know what the worst possible world will be. Right now, we're living in pretty damn good world, right? Remember how many pairs of shoes you own? Okay, right? We're doing all right. Does that mean that it could be better? Sure. Okay. A couple of things to notice about all of what I've said so far. In the story that I told, right, the natural tendency of the world where there is an increase in productivity is for there to be deflation. Prices normally would go down over time. However, we observe prices going up over time. That has a lot to do, right, with the government continuing to create inflation. Is inflation per se bad? Not necessarily. Right? If we understand that the expectation is that the government is going to have a certain rate of inflation, and by increasing the rate of inflation, we mean increasing the quantity supply of money in the marketplace, and we all understand it, and enter into our contracts with that understanding and that expectation, no big deal. However, when there are wild fluctuations in the supply of money, when there are wild fluctuations in the rate of inflation, in those cases, we have reason to be alarmed and concerned. And we may be in one of those time periods right now. I'm gonna wind down. Anybody got any other questions for me? Okay, so I sort of got into chapter 4, and I said that this week you should be doing chapters 5 and 7. Ha ha ha. That means that in order to do your homework, you're gonna have to read the textbook because I haven't said the things that I need to about it yet. I am so sorry, not sorry. All right, anything else for me before I let you go? Oh God, did I get recorded? Anything else? Any questions? All right, thank you. See you on Wednesday.
Appreciate it.